for Wednesday, November 14, 2018. I'd like to note for the record that this meeting is being webcast. The directors have received the relevant written materials in advance of today's meeting and are free to ask any questions at any time. Please note that we welcome public comment on the items on the following agenda. To ensure maximum opportunity for participation, speakers representing themselves may speak for up to 2 minutes each. And those representing groups may speak for up to 4 minutes with one speaker per group. Speakers' comments may address only the items considered at today's meeting. Before we begin with the substantive portion of the meeting, I would like to ask the directors whether anyone has any potential conflict of interest with respect to any of the items on today's agenda. If so, I would ask you to please make an appropriate disclosure on the record at this time. We will then be sure that you may recuse yourself from any discussion or vote with regard to such item or items. Hearing none, we will move on. And the foregoing being noted for the record, our first order of business is the approval of the minutes of the directors' meeting of April 5th, 2018. Any comments, corrections, additions, subtractions? Hearing none, we will ask for a motion for approval, please.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. The motion carries. Robin Stout, President of the Corporation, will now present a request for authorization to approve capital improvements projects and authorize the reallocation of funding under the New York Convention Center renovation funding agreement. Rob?
Thank you, Henry. This will look familiar to the directors. As you will recall, CCDC works very closely with CCOC on capital improvement items for the existing facility, separate and apart from the expansion that's ongoing. The directors authorized a funding agreement in 2015, pursuant to which basically OC recommends certain capital improvements, DC approves those and allocates certain funds for the advancement of those. The directors have previously authorized an allotment of $18.5 million as is set forth in Exhibit A to your director materials in connection with this item. The directors have previously authorized that $18.5 million for a wide variety of projects, including, I think the last one was earlier this year. As those projects mature, they come to completion, and for a perfect world, they would always come directly to budget, but of course they don't. Occasionally there are projects that go over, but there are also many projects that come under. So what's set forth in your materials are two projects that actually came a bit under, both listed at the bottom of the first page and the top of the second page, and those projects being concluded at under the projected budget leave a total of about $477,000 of available money to be reallocated. So again, after conversations with OC, based on what their projected priorities are, you see that it is contemplated, and we're going to request that you authorize that $477,000 be used for two separate projects. One you have heard about before, the perimeter security gate. We need about $30,000 more to conclude that project. And then a second project for the balance of the uncommitted funds, $447,000 for lighting upgrades to the existing building exterior perimeter. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm sure that Alan and Melanie would also be happy to answer any questions about this item. But otherwise, I would ask the directors to authorize the reallocation as set forth in your director materials.
All right, can we have a motion? Well, first, are there any questions for Robin or Alan or Melanie? If not, can we have a motion for approval, please?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. The motion carries. I'll now ask Robin to provide his president's report. We'll note for the record that this item is being presented for your information only, and no vote will be required. Robin?
I thought it would be useful to do a bit of show and tell at this because although I've been telling you for months that we have made a substantial progress on the project, it's not always visible progress. But over the last 3 months or so, or since the last time we were together, there's been a considerable amount of visual progress made in addition to underlying infrastructure. The good news is basically that, I'm sorry, you should look to orient yourself. This is looking to the east. So you've got 12th Avenue, the West Side Highway there. There's the Quill building to the north. Here's existing Javits to the south. And of course, then 11th Avenue over behind the other Port Authority vent. So you're looking east. Virtually all of the demolition was done some time ago. All of the excavation is done. All of the caissons, which are going to hold up the structure that we're constructing, all those caissons are done. And the vast majority, or I should say the great majority, of the concrete slabs, which we'll see better, you can see back here the concrete slabs, which will form the base. Remember, the truck marshaling facility will be here, which will be concrete, and the extension of the expo hall will be here, which will be steel. Virtually all of those slabs underneath that have been done. And as I say, that was the progress that had been going on for many months. Not great visual progress, but nonetheless important to the underlying structure that we are now commencing. So let me start in connection with the transformer building first. Remember that basically, even though we think of this expansion as one project, it is technically two separate projects. Approximately $100 million transformer building being built by the Tishman Construction Corporation, and then the rest of the expo, the $1.2 billion expansion of existing Javits with the truck marshaling facility, that $1.2 billion project being undertaken by Lindley's Turner, a joint venture. So let's start with the transformer building first. You remember from the last time that we met that it's been basically entirely enclosed now. All of the switchgear is in. And what's happening now is connections to existing Javits. You will recall that the third floor and the second floor are going to replace the existing electrical equipment that feeds Javits today and feeds Javits right now. So all that equipment has been installed and is now making, what the contractor is doing now is making its connections into existing Javits. So the first thing that will happen by approximately summer of next year is that the second and third floors will be energized, and they will be ready to power existing Javits, including the administrative wing here. And so that's well underway. All of those connections are being made and will be made over the next few months. We've been having a series of ongoing conversations with Con Ed, because of course we have to draw the Con Ed power from the street to bring it into the building. We expect the Con Ed will energize the first of the transformers in January, so really just right around the corner. That will allow us to start our commissioning and get it ready for the operating corporation to take over. The second piece of it, I think, again, I've described before, once the second and third floors are operational and supplying energy to existing Javits, what is the current transformer equipment that feeds Javits today, which is down on the first floor at the bottom of this building, that will then be demolished. It can be unhooked because it won't be necessary, and it will be demolished. And what will go in its place will be emergency generation capacity and standby generators, which will be available to Javits for the first time. So over the next 6 months or so, we will finish making the connections to existing Javits. This building will go live, and once the building goes live, then we'll start next summer or so with the demolition of the ground floor and then doing the connections that will be necessary, both to bring the emergency equipment to existing Javits as well, but then also the rest of it, which will be to connect the transformer building both to the expansion, both pieces of the transformer building, the switch gear, which is going to be the standard power, which will feed the expansion, and then of course the emergency generation will also be available to the expansion. And so those connections will be made then after we have finished these floors and made appropriate connections to Javits. As the directors will remember, you have authorized a GMP, a guaranteed maximum price for that construction at 93.5. You've also authorized a $3 million owner contingency. We continue to work within that. There are certain change orders that we've been reviewing with David Thurm, our project manager, and the Tishman folks, but we were within the envelope of that total of $96.5 million right now. So this remains on budget. And as I say, the schedule is that the energizing of the building will be next summer, and the emergency generation will be approximately 6 or 8 months after that. So the transformer building basically remains on track, on budget, on schedule. Before I move to the expansion, any questions about the transformer building? Yeah, let's move to the expansion then. This is where you can begin to see the visible progress. Yes, let's go here. So now you are looking back basically northwest, right? So here's Quill behind you, 40th Street, and here's the other end of what you just saw. So the first thing that's happening is that Lindley's Turner is doing a steel erection across what they're calling the spine, which is basically 39th Street, the former 39th Street. In addition to all of the other prep work we've done, we've relocated all the utilities out of 39th Street since it will be covered over with the building. The spine is being erected first. It's basically going to form a rigid center, which will then be able to hold both the expo hall as it gets expanded and the truck marshaling facility. And again, as I've always said, this is proceeding from west to east, so from 12th Avenue towards 11th. And as you can see, they're probably somewhat more than halfway already out to the eastern end of the site. And two things will begin to happen now. The next thing, I don't quite see them here yet, but remember the expo hall will be a large 100,000 square foot expansion of the existing exhibition space. And that will need a large truss in order to bridge that space, so we don't have to have columns that come down through it. So once the spine is erected, the next thing that will start happening is you will see very, very large trusses that are going to be placed from the spine to existing davits at intervals, and those will form basically a skeleton at which the rest of the steel will then be erected, again moving from the west to the east. That process is expected to take about 13 months altogether. It commenced on September 5, and so we expect by about September or so of next year that 100% of the steel will be erected, including the spine and all of the steel for the expo hall. And even before that steel is already 100% done, there will be the beginning of cladding, right? Putting on the exterior curtain wall, which will, again, everything's going to go from west to east. So as the steel rises here and moves to the east, what you'll see following behind is the cladding that will come around on that steel. Let's go to the last picture. This is, as you see, Quill again over here. And let me draw your attention to the northern portion of the site, which is where the concrete truck marshaling facility is going to go. You can see here that the pouring of the concrete has actually already begun here on 40th Street. This is where the egress for the truck marshaling facility is going to be. They've begun to form the wall of that to hold what will be the rest of the concrete pour as it comes again from west to east. And actually, let's go back to the first picture, if I could. Right. So this is back. You were looking this way a moment ago. Now you're looking east again. So what you'll see the beginnings of the wall for the truck egress. But what you see down here in the corner is actually this is the very beginning of the concrete pour for the truck garage. It started off here in this corner and will progress up the site. These are basically forms through which the concrete will then be poured as we move forward with the pour of the concrete. And the concrete schedule is basically within the steel schedule. In other words, the critical path is the erection of the steel, as I said, through approximately September of next year. Within that time frame, September of next year, the concrete will all be poured, and it's expected that the concrete pour will actually be finished before September of next year. They will be simultaneous, but the critical path is the steel because the steel takes a little bit longer. let's see, we've had 100% construction documents submitted. David Thurman and his team from the project manager has been going through them in great detail. DASNY has issued the building permit as of a couple of weeks ago, so we're set with our building permits. DASNY has been a terrific partner in terms of permitting as we need. You'll see we have cranes up that both lifting steel and will be helping with the pouring of the concrete. You will recall that New York City Department of Buildings is permitting those cranes, and luckily we've had a wonderful relationship with the New York City Department of Buildings, and they've been approving the cranes on a very timely basis, and we really appreciate that. And I've talked about the schedule. So far, still on schedule. All of those, the erection of the steel and the pouring of the concrete by approximately 10 months from now are in line with what we understood to be the schedule, which will bring us to a full conclusion of the project for March of 2021. And still on target for that. And so all of this still happening within the context of the $1.213 billion base contract with Lindley-Turner. You will recall we have a $50 million contingency for owner changes and another $50 million contingency for FF&E, fixtures and furnishing. We have had a number of change orders. We have, I think, we've had 4 change orders so far, which come to approximately $1 million, maybe $1.5 million from our contingency at the moment. There are discussions about other change orders, but again, well within the budget, well within the schedule. While I'm discussing this, I would be remiss if I don't point out to you what happened on September 11, which is what ended up adjourning our last meeting unexpectedly. At the very, very, very beginning of steel erection, here out close to the West Side Highway, the very first floor had begun to go up. The columns had been put in place, and the next thing that was happened was the cross beams were to be dropped. As I understand it, what's been explained to us is that as the columns went up, the next thing that was happened was the appropriate erection sequence would be to start with cross beams at the bottom for stability, then the middle, then the top. That's how you would normally erect things to maximize your stability. For reasons that are not quite clear, allegedly based on human error, the cross beam at the top was placed before the cross beams lower down. Those columns did not have sufficient reinforcement, and what happened was one of the beams simply tipped, couldn't hold the weight, simply tipped towards the West Side Highway. It didn't actually fall on the West Side Highway. You would be surprised, I was surprised actually how resilient this sidewalk shed is, because the sidewalk shed held the beam that fell over, including the crossbar.
And the beam was on the crane. It was on the hook.
Oh, that's right. The beam was on the hook too. And then during that day, when we finally were able to pull both the column and the beam back, the fence basically sprang back to its original condition. I mean, it's been replaced because it was damaged, obviously, but it was very interesting to see how resilient that was. So just that's what we understand based on reports what happened on 9/11. I'm happy to report, as I think all the directors know, there were no injuries. The stop work orders that were issued both by the Department of Buildings and DASNY were lifted within a week. As the work continued immediately thereafter, and as you can see, everything's been going good since then, and we've had no other incidents. So we're very grateful that no one was hurt during that particular incident. Before I move on to a little bit about money, any other questions about the expansion? So just quickly in terms of money, I explained to the directors before that we have committed the $1 billion New York State appropriation to 100% of that to the Lindley-Turner construction. We have made the arrangement with the with the Division of Budget, which I believe I've explained to you, which is that every quarter we ask Albany for an advance on that money. We're into, I think, our seventh or eighth quarterly request. We made another one just last week. That's been working fine. So we have all of the money in our accounts by the time we need to pay it out to Lindley-Turner. They've been giving us monthly requisitions. And so the flow of money continues to be fine. And of course, we have all the bond money in our accounts for everything else, including the transformer building. I've also explained to you how we review invoices. We get a lot of invoices, the largest of them always being the monthly Lindley's Turner invoice. But David and his project management team look that over. Paul Ryan with his Integrity Monitor team look those over. ESD accounting looks those over. So I have a lot of help in terms of making sure that we're only paying for work that has actually been performed. The next to last thing I should mention is that, of course, we do all this hand in glove with Allen Steel and the operating corporation. We only can build what they need to operate at the end of the day. So we meet with folks from the operating corporation at least weekly, if not more, and we're always back and forth in terms of not only the construction as set forth in the underlying program requirements, but to the extent that change orders are being discussed, those are all discussed with Alan and his team also. And the last thing, because I know it's on people's mind, is there were issues about security for existing Javits and the bollards. We've had a back and forth about how to pay for them. Alan and I have been back and forth. Henry and I have been back and forth. I believe I found a sufficient place in the DC budget to fund the initial $3 million for the vehicular barricades, which are the particular priority at the moment. And so I believe the bollards are taken care of. And that would be my president's report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Anyone have any questions for Robin? If not, I'll now ask Paul Conant to provide us with an update on the corporation's contracts with terms over 1 year. I will note for the record that this item is also being presented for your information only, and no vote will be required. Paul?
Thank you. Pursuant to Section 2879 of the Public Authorities Law, the directors are asked to annually review all contracts rendered over a period of 1 year, regardless of the contract amount. In fiscal year 2017-2018, CCDC procured 6 new contracts, and 12 contracts remained in effect from prior fiscal years. Before you is a list of all active contracts. As you review these contracts, you'll notice that the vast majority are for construction, consulting, permitting, legal, insurance, and other services related to the expansion project. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Paul? Okay, if not, thank you for your report, Paul. We'll continue with the agenda. Robin will now request authorization for the corporation to amend its contract with VJ Associates for construction cost estimating services.
Thank you, Henry. The board will remember that we have retained VJ Associates to do certain estimating costs in connection with the transformer building. Again, our project manager has a component of his team that does the cost estimating on the expansion project, but we have separate consultant to help us with the estimating on the transformer building. As I say, we've had back and forth with the Tishman on certain alleged change orders or alleged owner scope increases. What we need as we evaluate those is to understand what the cost ramifications of those are. VJ was initially hired to do that some time ago pursuant to authorization from the directors. Their contract had been scheduled to run out approximately now, but we would like to extend that to the end of the transformer project, and we think it will be approximately another $200,000 or so. The current contract is $217,000. We would increase that by $150,000 plus a 10% contingency, so that the new not-to-exceed total for VJ Associates would be $382,000. Be happy to answer any questions, but they've been doing good work, and we do need to continue to have this cost estimating.
I assume it falls within the overall scope of the budget for the transformer building?
Exactly correct.
Any other questions? Any questions from the public? If not, we'll entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries. Robin will also present a request for authorization for for the corporation to amend its contract with Tectonic Engineering and Surveying Consultants for inspection services. Robin, please.
So this is the last item. Maybe I should apologize for the short meetings, but I want you to understand that I think a short meeting is probably a sign of good progress on the site. If there were problems to discuss about it, we would probably have to have longer meetings, but
What did the chairman once say? Don't sell past the close.
That's right. But basically, the procurements are done. We're on schedule. We're on budget. To the extent that that changes, I will certainly let you know. But here's the last item in connection with specialty inspections, which are being done at the expansion site. Pursuant to law, the owner, meaning CCDC, is required to independently conduct certain inspections. The pouring of the concrete, the erection of the steel. This is obviously a check and balance against a contractor, developer, builder, so that more than one party is responsible for ascertaining that the construction is going pursuant to standard industry protocol. We have previously, pursuant to the the director's authorization, we previously retained Tectonic. They began with a relatively small assignment to do this work at the transformer building. Then their contract was amended for them to begin expansion work until we had publicly bid the work. We did publicly bid the work. They came in with the most responsible proposal, and so the directors have already amended this contract once to expand their work at the expansion, to expand their work to include the expansion project itself. That was at a time when the excavation and the pouring of the concrete slabs were just beginning. CCDC, in conjunction with our property management team, made our best guess estimate as to what those costs might be. Over the course of the last year, we have determined that our best guess estimate was a little under the mark. That's largely because for two reasons. One is this project is happening very rapidly, and so the number of inspections are more frequent than we had anticipated. And the second is that, again, back to the project happening so rapidly, is that many of these need to be turned over virtually overnight. So to the extent that there's a steel connection made or a concrete pour laid, the request from Lindley's Turner, which we have tried to accommodate, is that that should be inspected immediately, and it should be, in a perfect world, either a yay or a nay by within 24 hours, so that Lindley's Turner can continue then with the next section of what it is they're trying to build. So between the fact that the number of inspections is more frequent than we expected, and with the rapid turnover, we believe that we need a bit more money for Tectonic to conclude the legally required inspections. Again, to anticipate your question, it is within the budget that we had previously projected for this work. Obviously, it's beyond the existing contract, but it's within the projected budget for the consultant work. Just to remind the directors, based on your materials, the existing contract amount is a not to exceed $2.95 million. In order to cover the bases, including some additional scope as is set forth here in terms of electrical and safety, CCDC is recommending that that amount be increased by an additional $3 million to a new total not to exceed just below $6 million, which we believe will carry us both through the end of the transformer project and the end of the expansion project. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Hey, Robin, when the thing was initially approved, did it contemplate these additional amendments? Like, if the world was done differently, should it have been done all bulk up front, or you wouldn't have known it? Meaning, like, because you have an RFP process, so did the RFP process contemplate the amendments that would be in place?
I don't mean to avoid the question. There was an RFP process. I think it's briefly described in your.
Yeah, I'm reading.
Right. There was an RFP process, and really there's about 16 or 17 different kinds of specialty inspections that are necessary. So we asked for bids on that entire set. Now, in order to create that bid, a bidder would have to estimate the number of inspections required under each of those subcategories. And so at the time the initial bids came in, based on the schedule as it was set forth at that time, most of the bidders came in roughly around where Tectonic's original bid was, meaning the 2.9 number, which is why Tectonic was ultimately selected as the bidder. But again, as I say, whether CCDC and its teams should have had a better concept of the amount and scope of inspections, or whether Tectonic or any of the rest of the bidders should have done that, is certainly a fair question to ask. But based on the reality of our experience over the past 6, 8, 12 months, this is what appears is going to be needed to finish the inspection job.
But from a process standpoint, there was nothing in the initial RFP and the awarding of the RFP that would preclude this type of amendment.
No. Again, it's not a scope issue, it's a quantity issue.
You said that there was a budgeted amount, and this is still below the budgeted amount. What was the budgeted amount?
Well, without telling our contractors how much money we have, there's a total of another $1 million or $2 million in terms of contractors for the expansion as a whole, which would be available to cover these costs.
Would you say that the extra $3 million will carry us to the conclusion of the project?
Yes, that is anticipated to do so. Yes.
I'd move the amendment.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Any comments from the public?
Henry,
Okay.
before you, I just want to bring one more thing to the director's attention. Not about the length of the meetings, but about the frequency of the meetings. We have tried to establish ourselves now, so we're meeting approximately quarterly, and we're trying to accommodate those directors who are both CCOC and CCDC directors by having the meetings jointly. We can talk about whether we should narrow the time gap between the meetings, but in order for you to not have to show up in two different places at two different times, Alan and I have been trying to coordinate the DC meetings and the OC meetings to the extent possible. We however, plan to do a 12-month schedule, once a month meeting schedule for 2019, with the expectation that our aim would be only to hold those meetings which would be in conjunction with OC, basically every other meeting. So I will tell the directors that is our intention, to do a calendar with 12 meetings, one a month, with the expectation that you should understand that it's likely that we won't need all of those meetings. However, if you would prefer that we do only matching meetings with OC, we can do that. That will be at the risk of, if we need an extra meeting, of having to do a scheduling which might not otherwise be on your calendar. So we thought the better part of discretion was probably to continue a 12-month calendar and cancel as necessary, as opposed to having to fill in if necessary.
But you won't schedule meetings for the summer, correct?
August is off, correct.
Makes sense.
Okay, so we'll do the 12-month, we'll do the 11-month calendar, and then we'll try to give you as much notice in advance as to which meetings are being canceled. Thank you, Henry.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's nothing else, then we'll have a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second? Thank you very much. When is our next meeting? Do you know the date, Ron?